Taking the view now onto the victim and the survivors of rape, what is life like for them after an incident?
I mean, definitely that's what the Rape Crisis deals with, is providing a direct service to survivors. So obviously, like Kelly has mentioned, your life is never the same. So you've been perpetrated very intimately. So there are physical symptoms, there are behavioral symptoms, there are psychological, and there are different phases of those kinds of symptoms. So you have immediately after the rape, he or she has to present to a hospital, within 72 hours for different kinds of medical processes, which inevitably impacts on the criminal justice and process as well as making a case. And then there's the psychological effects, more longer-term psychological effects. Often I say to somebody when we're busy training, if you've lost anybody, whether it be a pet or a family member, your life never goes back to being the same. And similarly in a rape, and I think this is what society doesn't understand, your life never goes back to being the same, and you've got to continuously adjust. But people's level of resilience are so amazing in terms of survivors. So they go through all of these phases, and there's aspects around the emotional kinds of, there's depression, there's having, if there's safety issues, feeling vulnerable, security concerns, going back to work. There's a huge range of impact. It's not just from a psychological, emotional point of view, but also from physical safety, feeling supported, whether victim blaming happens and stigmatizing is happening in your community, within your family, how you're being supported. All of those things have a complex impact on the survivor, besides the rape and the physical aspects of it.
I think also to remember that in South Africa, as with elsewhere, most rapes are perpetrated by people that we know. So they might be people in your family, they might be your boyfriend's friend, the uncle that you've lived with. There's a variety of very close relationships. And so the trauma of the disruption in that space extends far beyond, that immediate event. And so the survivor is constantly dealing with the fallout of having made the report, of having made such a claim against somebody, of having disrupted other families, of having a perpetrator arrested who might be the only breadwinner in the family. So there's a really complex set of circumstances that I think mean it's the longevity of the issue is far beyond other kinds of crimes, for example.
How does rape culture then contribute to that experience after the fact as well for the victim?
So I think rape culture is, as Nazma said earlier, a really critical part of the victim blaming that we see happen. The first thing we think when somebody has been raped is, what was she wearing? Why was she there? Why did she go with that guy by herself? Why wasn't she out with 5 other friends? Why? Whereas we don't ask those same questions of victims of other kinds of crimes, for example, or for men who are victimized in crime in the same kind of situation. So I think for me, rape culture supports the way that we as a society erode the legitimacy of a victim of sexual offenses as victimhood. And I think that's part of what makes it even more difficult to report. Because when you've seen the way that criminal justice, family, friends, other people, bystanders deal with a survivor who discloses, it becomes you're much less likely to do it yourself, or even to suggest to somebody who discloses to you that they should do those things. Because when the police ask you the first thing, well, have you bathed? Did you destroy the evidence? Were you drinking? Were you out with him? Do you know him? Was that your boyfriend? Is this a case where your dad caught you having sex and now you want to lay a case? And those, let me not make the impression that it's only police that have those attitudes. Healthcare workers, court workers, security guards who stand at the front of the clinic where you come to say, I need services, how can I please help you? It becomes very difficult for people to access critical health-based and psychosocial services within that context, and definitely makes people reluctant to report.
I mean, there's sort of things that Gal is talking about, that is the prevailing culture, and if you listen to it, it's the entire society that is supposed to be there to support the survivor. So the questions that are being asked to her in terms of blaming her, like why, are not being asked to the perpetrator, like why did you perpetrate, why, all of those kinds of things. So that prevailing culture is permeating every aspect of the process for the survivor. Firstly, it's there prior to and then post as well. So wherever she goes, she's going to come up against all of these kinds of questioning and all of these kinds of prevailing and this is what we're trying to do, trying to expose this culture, that instead of looking at the victim, looking at why are we not looking at the perpetrator as well.